Yes, let's welcome Denis Elisevich, who is already with us. Denis, good morning to you. We're very glad to see you and hear from you. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dennis. Did you hear that I read out the comments that were sent to us from Frankfurt am Main? No?
No, I didn't hear the comment. I already heard your answer, Dennis.
Hello to everyone from Frankfurt am Main. As a Ukrainian, we need peace. I want to return home and build a great country together with people of common sense. Dennis, I hardly ever see comments like that. It's surprisingly nice.
Yes.
Wonderful. I want to ask you something. I watched your stream. It's probably one of the latest ones. You were with another journalist, I don't know his name, but it was a very interesting recording. I think it was yesterday, about a day ago, if I'm not mistaken. And you were asked a question, where were you when the war started? And I was surprised by what you said. You said at home. But when that journalist asked you if you were ready for it, you said I was. I knew about it about 12 days before it started. I want to ask you, how did you know? What does that mean?
12 hours before it started?
12 hours, I'm sorry.
Yes, of course. Well, that's how it was. I was given accurate information that Russian tanks were already, I don't remember how many kilometers from Kyiv, and that a full-scale war would happen, 100%.
Tell me, please. Well, I know that until the very last minute, many people, not those living in Ukraine, but others, kept saying that this war would never happen, that it was impossible. Russians were saying, well, on their channels, that this was just some kind of joke. And this went on almost until the very last minute. So those people who were saying, no, never, do you think they also understood that they were being dishonest, to put it mildly?
No. Well, honestly, nobody really believed in a full-scale war. No one actually believed in a war like this, as we see now with Kyiv being bombed. No one believed in that kind of war.
Well, yeah.
Because I believed in a war like the ATO, just a bigger ATO, like what was happening in eastern Ukraine, only more powerful and widespread.
I just remember that famous Security Council meeting in Russia, when Putin was asking each participant about their opinion. And of course, that was a masterful, truly remarkable dialogue between Mr. Narishkin and Vladimir Putin, yes, the Russian president. And back then, it was somehow clear that most likely something really bad was truly unavoidable. But honestly, I still thought they would limit themselves to the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. That is, they would try to send in maybe, let's say, a limited number of troops, equipment, and so on, and that would be it. But of course, a full-scale invasion, I honestly did not expect that.
Dennis.
Everyone thought so. Well, almost everyone. Some thought nothing would happen, and authorities, including Defense Minister Reznikov, officially assured the same.
Well, after the council, I also thought that nothing would happen, to be honest. But when I watched this council, literally, it was, I think, a day before, yes, on the eve, literally a day before the invasion, I think. Honestly, I was already starting to think a little differently, but honestly, I didn't expect this. Dennis?
Tell me, please. Well, Kyiv in 3 days, right? But that's what we heard at first from the Russian side. And just yesterday, I heard a point of view that everything happened differently, that no one thought there would be a full-scale invasion because Putin, kind of miscalculated his capabilities there, his strength, and Zelensky didn't believe it or wasn't ready. So that's why he sort of wasn't prepared. On one hand, and this one also didn't believe that the situation would turn out exactly as it has for 4 years now. Do you agree with that?
Of course. I honestly don't know what Zelensky believed in. I can tell you one thing. At that time, under the guise of exercises with Belarus, Putin's army surrounded Ukraine. There were about 200,000 soldiers. And such a huge country as Ukraine. You can't even partially occupy such a country with that number of people unless you have precise information that people will surrender, capitulate, or the whole country is full of traitors, right? Life shows that for Putin, Ukraine was full of traitors who successfully surrendered these territories. Because today Putin is fighting with 600 or 700,000 people, and that looks like a real attempt to storm a huge country like Ukraine. That means there was a different calculation, and the outcome wasn't what he expected.
Well, that's what I asked you about. That's how it was written to me. Putin underestimated the resistance and overestimated his own strength. Zelensky listened to Yermak and didn't prepare for the war. Do you agree with that statement?
He did listen to Yermak, but you understand, if you're the president and you listen to someone like that, or anyone at all, and you make decisions based on someone else's words, well, then everything is clear about you. Yermak, without a doubt, in my opinion, is an agent of Russian influence, but the one responsible for everything is the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. On my last stream, I showed, a certain episode from the Ukrainian parliament. On February 22nd at 11 a.m., there was a session of the Ukrainian parliament. The head of the tax committee, Zelensky's man, Hetmantsev, was speaking. I call him an economic saboteur. By the way, he worked for 8 or 9 years as an assistant to a recognized FSB agent. We had this guy, Sivkovich. Now, I believe he's a senator in Russia, a true FSB operative. He worked in Ukraine for years, then fled to Russia and got a post there. America recognized him, and the State Department also called him an agent. So he was shouting there, what 50 billion hryvnias for the army? Why this populism? We won't allocate 50 billion hryvnias for the army. For those unfamiliar with the exchange rate, that's nearly $2 billion at that time. So they didn't want to allocate money to the army. They were spending it on some nonsense like building roads, which Russian tanks later used. That's the story. But there's another point here. Look at how propaganda worked. Nobody talks about this. They find enemies for the crowd somewhere on the internet. Someone is broadcasting there. Someone wrote a post. Someone made a repost. These are the enemies. Because of them, Putin attacked, occupied, and that's why we're bankrupt. No need to deal with those who actually held positions and are still there to this day and really had the authority to make decisions. The levers of influence are given to the crowd. Unfortunately, it's very hard to explain, but I'm trying to do it.
Tell me, please, when you say that they find enemies, it's not those who, so to speak, held positions, as you just said, but someone out there, somewhere external, right? As I understand it, people from outside who are Ukrainians.
But who have never been in power. That is, well, let's say people like me who express an alternative point of view.
I see. And you think that, as you just said, well, it's not nice to say it like that. The crowd goes along with it and really listens to these suggestions.
That's putting it mildly. I'd use another word, but I don't want to offend anyone.
So do you think they really believe what they're being offered?
Yes. Do you understand how psychology works in this situation? A post-Soviet person who all his life, even as a child, was oppressed by the Soviet system. Basically, communism, it was a totalitarian dictatorship like that.
But a post-Soviet person, sorry, Dennis, it's the same in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, or anywhere they lived.
Yes, Kazakhstan, everywhere, well, except for the Baltic countries. They were a bit closer to Western civilization. And the way he thinks is like this. There's this guy, Elisevich, let's say. He left the country. The authorities blame him. Everyone blames him. What a convenient target. Say something about him. Accuse him of something. He can't reach me and I can't reach him. But if you say something against the authorities, excuse me, you can get in serious trouble. That's not a great position. And that's basically how these petty people live and think.
Tell me, please, you said you're trying to do something about it. Are you succeeding? Thank you.
Well, you always want more. Something probably works out. But it's far from something that can help influence things quickly. I mean, there is some influence, but it's limited and slow.
Tell me something. When we invite guests, well, now it's harder, guests from Ukraine. Before we used to invite, pardon me, like Elena Kurbanova or Roma Tsimbalyuk. But now, as I understand it, it seems to them that we're not exactly the kind of radio they want to come to. I'm also trying to put it gently, Dennis, and they say things like, well, those people go there, so we won't go. Well, yesterday we had 2 guests on a Ukrainian topic, one actually from Ukraine, that's Mikhail Shetelman from Kyiv, and the second was Sergei Lyubarsky, who lives in the United States. But the topic of Ukraine is also, so to speak, important to him. Well, it's part of his program. Yes, he talks about it a lot. From what he says, he often visits Ukraine. Yuri Tabak is another one who also visits Ukraine. I'm not asking you right now to call them something or other. I can assume that you easily could. But still, people listen to them too. Look, Sheitelman has a channel with more than 700,000 subscribers, Lyubarsky. I don't remember, I don't know. And Tabak, I don't know either. So that means people listen to an alternative point of view, especially those who are still there, more than those like you who have left or not.
No, the audience overlaps partially, but mostly it's different. I will be very, well, let's say gentle, again, purely out of respect for your channel. I will behave very politely and use diplomatic terms. I am very wary of such people. You said Sheitelman is in Kyiv, Ukraine. We need to double check this information. I have never seen him on the ground in Ukraine. Another point is that Ukraine has become a big piece of meat that flies have swarmed to make money from this, gain fame, popularity, and assert themselves. I'm really amazed when a person with honestly bad English, write posts on X in English-speaking spaces in the sense of trying to influence, and some of them got millions of views, they were reposted. I won't even mention who wrote to me about those posts. People close to Trump, let's put it that way. And I'm doing this for Ukraine in English, while those people who have lived here for 30 years have perfect English. They're going to Ukraine, you understand? Of course, it's purely a heartfelt impulse, like they have nothing else to do, they need to spend money in Ukraine, risk themselves under missiles. I definitely believe that. Yes,
Tell me, please, I want to ask you about a couple more people who are being written about today, and one of them is named Krasev. They're asking to invite him along with you. Just tell us why, because, or Zoya Kuskova, I don't know, neither Zoya Kuskova nor Krasev.
you know, I started to get a bit more active there. First, we did it with Kedmi on your show, then we just talked with Svetov. Then I was invited to other channels for such debates. But I'm not a circus monkey. Just give me an opponent and I'll put on a show here. I'm not here for that. There should be some meaning to it. Of course. Sorry, but if I had started a YouTube channel and on the third day jumped in with only 500 subscribers jumping at everyone saying, let's have debates, that wouldn't be very respectable. I was doing business. I didn't use social networks for communication, but before the war, I mean business. Quietly, nobody knew me. And thank God people were running YouTube channels. And they jump at those who have hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers trying to advertise themselves at their expense, claiming that they know everything. If you can lead people and have the same tools as I do, then please go ahead and lead. So, well, what could there be, Krasev? It's completely pointless. I mean, he's a political strategist who serves some clans. What am I supposed to debate with a person who does something specifically in the interests of their employer? That's a completely pointless endeavor. I'm interested in doing this with those who actually influence something, who represent their own point of view, who are at least a political actor.
Well, I completely understand what you're saying, and I never counted on these debates. It was just an idea that came up during the radio work. For example, I'll give you an example. When we invited Maxim Shevchenko and Yakov Kedmi. Yes, Yakov Kedmi is Israeli. Shevchenko openly says things there. He says they're anti-Zionist, but I think that Maxim is actually being anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. That's how it seems to me. But if I had never invited Shevchenko together with Kedmi or with Ezra Moore, we would never have seen this counterbalance. Otherwise, we could just keep talking among ourselves, talking and talking. Dennis, but that doesn't change the situation at all. The important thing, I think, is to show the aspect of when you were with Kedmi. By the way, I thought it would be a bit different. Because Yakov Yosifovich is from a different generation. He has, so to speak, his own understanding and way of thinking. For him, debates are something completely out of the realm of fantasy. If you remember, he would just stick to his own agenda, and he didn't care at all what you said or what we said. He just needed to get across to the listener, the viewer, what he came to say. That's all.
There were debates.
Well, you know, kind of like that. Plus, so to speak, you are people of completely different calibers. I mean, it's not that someone is better or worse, just very different. And I'm not sure it was a good option, at least for you. If there had been a young man sitting there, you know, someone from your generation with a different point of view. So people are writing to me here asking to invite Yevgeny Murayev. Has he ever been on your show? And does Denis Elisevich want to talk to him? I should ask Denis first whether he wants to or not. And then, as Denis rightly said, he's not a monkey to be pulled around, coming here and there and somewhere else, like with Svetov. By the way, Denis, I really liked your conversation. It was sensible and smart. There were two interesting people sitting there, intellectual and respectable, who were talking about topics that interest all of us. And simply put, I absolutely agree with you. You are absolutely right. Denis Mansar, I'm sorry for getting carried away and not letting you speak.
Yes, well, I wanted to say, first of all, there probably weren't any major events as such, except for the Zelensky-Zaluzhny story, which suddenly started to develop. Well, Dennis, I'll probably ask you about that a little later, too. But the most recent news is yesterday's phone conversation between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. Yes, where, well, of course, it took place in a wonderful atmosphere, a wonderful conversation, and so on. But the planned meeting for the end of February was postponed to the beginning of March. Yes, and it was expressed that if Trump wants to end the war within a month, then Zelensky really hopes that the war will end this year. So, Dennis, how would you comment on this phone conversation? And in your opinion, why were these negotiations postponed after all, the trilateral ones? Because really, there probably isn't much to talk about yet, or what?
Preparations are needed. Right now in Geneva, Umarov and Arakhamia are meeting, along with our Ukrainian representatives handling economic issues. So, well, in short, the delegations are meeting.
After that,
As far as I know, they are going to Miami here in Florida to continue talking with Kushner and Vitkov. And all of this is preparation before the trilateral meeting, which, well, the dates are being postponed for completely understandable reasons. I would like to point out here that Trump is calling just a day before the negotiations. This is clearly important, and the topic of the conversation is obvious. And Zelensky tells him, I really hope the war will end this year. To which Trump replies, no, that's too long. I need it to end within a month. And this reveals each person's intentions. Zelensky is not going to end the war. You can find these conversations, I hope, within a year on the internet. He said that 2023 is decisive for the war. 2024 is decisive for the war, and 2025 is decisive for the war. We're on the home stretch. February 2026 is ending. It's the beginning of the year. Now, I hope it will end by the end of the year, that's all. Trump replies, I'll give you strong guarantees, but you must accept a territorial compromise. This was discussed yesterday and is partly being discussed today.
regarding this whole Zelensky-Zaluzhny story, there's Zaluzhny's interview, which he supposedly didn't even give. But somehow it ended up in the media, and now people are discussing it. And the Ukrainian president himself commented on this interview. What can you say about this? Why is this story coming up right now?
Thank you. Well, as far as I know, there was a conversation. It was Zaluzhny with Associated Press earlier, and they released it now, probably because someone needs it. Well, you see, Zaluzhny is basically right there, but I always ask the question, what is Zaluzhny proposing? And now he spoke in London, where he had a lot of awkward moments with the English language, and it all spread through the press. I didn't make fun of him for his language, that's not the point, but I really do say this on every broadcast. I can tell the difference between a person who just speaks poorly but has intelligence and something to say, and a person who is completely empty. We had a president, Viktor Fedorovich Yanukovych, who was once a Soviet-era garage manager, couldn't speak Ukrainian, and struggled to form sentences. Vitaly Klitschko has been in politics for 20 years and still can't speak. Why? Not because he's stupid, he just has nothing to say. He has nothing to say, he wasn't made for this, he's simply not made for this. It's the same with Zaluzhny, and Zelensky too, the same story with Zaluzhny. He reads from a paper like Javier Milei, just reading. But when it's his own writing, he feels every word and knows what he's saying. Donald Trump is the same way. Zaluzhny had his assistant write it, then rehearsed before the speech like an actor. He doesn't really engage, understand, or contribute. Zelensky says the war will last until year's end. Now Zaluzhny will say, like he said before, we have no options, only to survive, something like that. He said, no, Ukraine exists, not just to survive, but to be a successful country.
Tell me, please, we are being told here that a political campaign has started in Ukraine. This probably has to do with the elections, I guess, I don't know. Zelensky said the following in an interview with the BBC. Ukraine could switch from mobilization to a voluntary contract army if partners help with funding. What does this mean?
We are ready to switch to a system like Putin's, signing up contract soldiers without mobilization or draft officers or forced conscription. Well, give us money, senor. That's basically how it sounds. Like, for everything, give us money. For everything, give us money. Give, give, give. By the way, Hetmantsev, who I mentioned, said 2 days before the war that funding the army wasn't necessary. He just came out and said that in April, Ukraine is bankrupt and that Hungary is blocking this 90 billion credit for us. He says that in April, that's it. After April, there will be nothing left to pay social benefits, no payments at all. This guy says, give me money, admit it, it doesn't add up. I want to continue the war, but I don't have any money for anything. That's why it needs to end if you can't feel sorry for anyone anymore. But that's the calculation. Unfortunately, I'm absolutely not okay with it. The situation where Ukraine has been turned into a beggar.
Tell me, please, are elections necessary in Ukraine today? Is that right?
Yes, of course. Yesterday, I would say, yesterday.
And how would that be possible, in your opinion, in this situation?
Which I have already talked about many times today, to hold hybrid elections, electronic plus real, depending on the region. Putin is ready to go. Believe me, if Trump is given such a task, Trump is putting pressure on Zelensky. Regarding the elections, I think with Putin, you can agree on a week or two, of course, not 60 days like Zelensky says. A ceasefire for the sake of the elections, at least for a week, and in a week you can hold the elections. That's it. You can vote for 7 days, and counting the votes is another question. But for 7 days, you can come to the polling stations, vote on your phone. Not 1 day, not 2. For 7 days, we have a state of emergency. 7 days without shelling. That's it. And then we would see if Putin is really interested in pushing Zelensky aside, which I already doubt. By the way, Dennis, why do you doubt it? Wouldn't he shoot? Well, why? Because there are a lot of nuances being hidden, especially in this Mendich Gate. It's connected to people of Semyon Mogilevich. Semyon Mogilevich is an absolute leader. Well, it's called the Russian mafia, but in reality, it's more of a post-Soviet mafia from the 90s, even from the 80s, by the way. He's from Kyiv. In my opinion, all of this was and is being done under the wing of the KGB. I mean, why would the KGB put such a talented person in prison if he can work? As far as I know, he lives in Sochi and he always had a dacha next to the KGB guys. He's a serious person. Everyone is wary and afraid of him. Now his people are in Mendich Gate, including our connected oligarch, Firtash. And I understand maybe the 200,000 people I mentioned to you today who just couldn't possibly occupy all of Ukraine. Maybe Ukraine was being prepared to be surrendered. If you put everything together, maybe Ukraine was being prepared to be surrendered.
Dennis, is this some kind of conspiracy theory or not?
Let people decide for themselves, but for some reason in the article Dennis mentions, it was also said there that Zelensky blocked Zelensky in preparing for the war, that Zelensky told Zelensky they needed to declare martial law earlier, but Zelensky flatly refused to do it. I criticized the Democrats, but Biden and Blinken were forcing him to prepare for war, to evacuate the frontline areas. If this had been done, there wouldn't be a graveyard of people in Mariupol today, and Bucha wouldn't have happened. You probably understand, none of this was done, and this already smells like a war crime. But why, as I said, discuss it? The crowd just needs to be thrown a bone so they don't get distracted from the main thing, so to speak. But for me, I need answers to these questions.
Tell me, please, this Semyon Mogilevich, I've never heard this name before. Dennis, was he a well-known figure in Ukraine or not?
He is a well-known figure all over the world. I don't want to focus on this so it doesn't look like I'm trying to stick my nose into everything. This is a serious organization. They do their own thing, but can Ukraine be involved in this organization? And our top officials, they are involved. That's what we need to talk about, and that's what I need to discuss. That's all I know, and it gives reason to believe that Ukraine was being prepared to be handed over. There's no doubt that Ukraine is infiltrated with agents. You have to understand all the territories that people are shouting we must take back. In reality, Russia didn't capture them in a full-scale war. Those territories were simply handed over, just given up.
Editor. Tell me, please, I'm curious, did you listen to the address of Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to the nation? It was yesterday or the day before, I think. And what was said there about Ukraine?
There was just one word, that this war needs to end. But there was another episode about the murdered Irina Zarutskaya. He invited her mother. She was standing next to Charlie Kirk's wife, and he promised her fair justice. Well, the Democrats didn't even stand up at that moment, which is an absolute disgrace to me. Well, you see, Donald Trump invites people to Congress and we stay silent. Well, we, meaning Ukraine, everyone is silent as if no one was killed.
By the way, I didn't get a chance to ask you. Trump is inviting the mother of Irina Zarutskaya, who recently died, and the wife of Charlie Kirk for the very same reason. He was also killed. Charlie was also killed. And what do you think? Why, seeing this, does Ukraine somehow not comment on this?
It's already too late to comment. I brought up this topic when she was just killed, while everyone was silent, and like I said, they completely ignored everything. I suspect the logic is that every day we lose civilians and soldiers in the war. Well, so what? One less Ukrainian. Well, it just goes into the statistics. That's the kind of attitude toward people.
Yes, you're absolutely right, because I remember when you brought up this topic, people in the chat were saying, so many have died, people die here every day, why talk about her? Well, I don't quite understand, Dennis, what's the connection? Both are bad, both are tragedies.
Well, of course, but you understand still, a person who dies in the war or under rockets, there's a war going on. Everyone who is on the territory of Ukraine today is in a risk zone with different levels of risk. But when you are brutally killed with a knife in America, the country you moved to escape the war, well, that's still a very high-profile issue. I'm not saying Zelensky should cry on air about this, but he could have said something. I know about the tragedy of our Ukrainian woman. I offer my condolences to the parents, all in the evening video address. That would have been enough, but it wasn't done.
That's enough. By the way, speaking of another person who passed away, I mean, Yevgeny Balashov, Hennady Balashov, when I see that they're writing about Murayev again, I'm completely confused now. I insist that you and Yevgeny Murayev absolutely have to be on Radio Vera. It's simply necessary. Going back to Hennady Balashov, when Hennady Viktorovich passed away, I also saw a lot of comments in the chat that were, to put it mildly, not very nice. There were many more of them than the others. Why do you think that is?
I'm telling you, it all depends on the audience. I didn't have the kind of comments you're talking about.
Regarding why do you think, by the way, are you familiar with Yevgeny Murayev? I want to ask you.
Of course not.
Why, of course, Dennis?
What could possibly connect us with a person who has an openly pro-Russian and anti-Western stance?
Thank you. Yes, I actually wanted to talk a little more about the elections. Yesterday, we also brought up this topic in our conversation with Mikhail Scheitelman and Sergei Lyubarsky. I could be wrong, of course, but it seemed to me that it was Mikhail Scheitelman who said it, that if, let's say, elections were held in this way, meaning in the shortest possible time without, let's say, any pre-election campaigning, so to speak, yes. Well, I mean, not like regular democratic elections, but rushed like this and with an unclear voting mechanism, then there is a high probability that Zelensky will be re-elected. And in fact, this by and large actually plays into his hands to hold the elections in exactly this way, rather than, let's say, actually achieving the possibility of allocating much more time for the elections and accordingly allowing, for example, those who are outside Ukraine to vote. Yes, well, let's say in consular sections in Ukrainian embassies in the countries where they live, but without resorting to electronic voting. And the same accordingly applies to the army. Yes, that is some separate polling stations for voting, but by no means using an electronic system, which is very easy to fake or falsify. What do you think about this? How much would such an election, if held in this way, benefit Zelensky or not?
I understood your question. It needs to be divided into several parts. Got it. From Scheitelman's point of view, it's very popular right now. What he said and what you repeated, it's very popular.
Yes, it seemed to me that that's exactly what he said. Yes.
So I can tell you my version. Those elections, as you say, with a bunch of drawbacks, in a short time frame, without proper preparation, Zelensky will lose them. He will try to falsify them, but he will still lose. You can't just give yourself an extra 50%, no way. Even Putin doesn't give himself 50% or Lukashenko. It doesn't work like that. If he tries to do that, people won't accept it. I'm convinced that this will be the red line that even the patient Ukrainians won't be able to tolerate. In my opinion, Zelensky will lose any election in any format. If it was really so beneficial for him, as Scheitelman said, then why isn't he holding them right now? And is Trump putting a lot of pressure on him? He could have said, guys, they're saying I'm illegitimate, so I'm calling an election and I'll prove everything to you right now. You see how much pressure he's under, but he still resists. So maybe it's not that simple. Now you're talking about voting at embassies abroad. 10 million already, well, actually 11, maybe even 12 million people have left Ukraine. Yes, they're not concentrated in any one country, but can you imagine organizing that many people to vote at embassies? It will be very difficult to do. Maybe it could work in Poland since people are more concentrated there, but you would still need extraordinary measures. And the issue of electronic voting, well, that could have been done differently as well. I've been saying for 2 years that we could have reached out to Elon Musk, to other great IT entrepreneurs and asked them, guys, can you do this? To make history, to hold the first electronic election in history, and to have your name go down in history. And it could have been done with an electronic dashboard on a website, which would be up and running, and we could see everything in real time. Nothing would be impossible. In real time, we would see these ratings, who is for whom, while the paper ballots would have to be counted manually. And I want to tell you right now, it won't work. It's just that right now is such a period and we're in such a phase and in such a state of fear that in any case, we'll have to make extraordinary decisions, unconventional, bold, and risky ones. I'm not saying it's going to be a walk in the park and everything will be easy and simple. But excuse me, postponing elections for 2 years, not holding elections at all, that's not democracy. People are tired. Ukraine is tired. Ukraine wants a different president. Ukraine wants to end the war, and there are no chances for the future.
Well, again, you also talk about postponement, right? But in fact, the Ukrainian constitution does not allow for elections during wartime. So any elections held would simply be illegitimate. And then regarding Zelensky, people will say not that he is a president past his term, but that he is an illegitimate president because he was, let's say, elected outside the law. Yes, that could also happen, right?
I don't know. Maybe you have a law degree, I do, but honestly, it's not a complete one. But I wouldn't presume to judge such things. That's the Constitutional Court's role, but when Zelensky was advised to seek its interpretation on whether to hold it, he refused. To which those who consider themselves authoritative lawyers in Ukraine said yes, because according to the Constitution, you can't hold parliamentary elections during wartime, but you can hold presidential ones. But I want to reassure you right away, we're talking now, and for several months work has been underway on a bill that will allow elections to be held without relying on everything you've just mentioned. Under martial law, elections can occur without waiting 90 days, for instance. Elections can be announced in 20 to 30 days as a one-time exception. This won't always be the case in Ukraine. In such extreme conditions, this is how Zelensky is building himself a backup plan. That's what's happening.
Both of you have a legal education, by the way. Well, I'm not implying that all Denises are lawyers. Dennis, good afternoon. How do you feel about the legal carrying of weapons in Ukraine as a reform for the protection of citizens?
It is definitely necessary, because in Ukraine we have this silly phrase that everyone repeats, guarantor of the Constitution, meaning the President of Ukraine. I always refer to the American Constitution. The Second Amendment protects the First. The right to bear arms is essential to safeguarding the Constitution and freedoms. However, implementing this in Ukraine will be very challenging.
Why will this be difficult, Dennis?
I've brought this issue up many times. It's in my program. Reform is one of the first points. People say now everyone will just kill each other. You ask the question, but you understand that no one commits crimes with registered weapons. Criminals file off the serial number and commit crimes with weapons that have no serial number bought on the black market. Well, who in their right mind would commit a crime with their own pistol? You'll be tracked down in 15 minutes.
Well, I could argue with you here, Dennis.
Well,
I could argue in the sense that, yes, I agree that's true. If you're preparing for a crime that, for example, will involve firearms, like, let's say, robbing a bank, yes, it's clear that weapons will be obtained that are not registered and have altered serial numbers. Well, if a group is sitting in the park drinking, someone walks by, they get into an argument, like it usually happens, and then it escalates, someone pulls out a gun. At that point, no one will care whether it's registered or not. The main thing is...
I absolutely agree. But only when you're sitting there and there's a drunk group and that drunk group is bothering someone, they'll know that this someone also has a weapon and things could end very badly. This could happen within the drunk group itself.
Within the group. It's like, do you respect me or not? Then someone pulls a weapon and shooting begins.
And that will happen. But there are other statistics. How many crimes are prevented thanks to gun ownership? You see, it's like medicine, excuse me. When you're treating a serious illness, it has side effects. Some people die from the medicine and some are cured and go on to live their whole lives. There will always be some incidents like you mentioned, such as domestic disputes. Even today, People may not use guns, but they cut food and can stab someone with a knife. So what's the difference?
Here, well, I guess I'll express an unpopular opinion. In my view, society should be ready for this. In my view, today Ukrainian society is not ready for this, just like Russian society. I don't want to offend anyone, but American society isn't ready for it either. They're all the same in this regard.
Dennis, what did you say? I didn't catch that.
Society can't be ready, and American society wouldn't have been ready either. But the founding fathers sat down and wrote it all. Society is never ready for anything, especially in post-communist societies. But ready for what? When it is finally ready, that's for sure, it will die, our generation. And it won't be ready for anything. You either make reforms and change the country, or you don't. If you want to sit and wait, then I can tell you, Dennis, Ukrainian society would never have been ready for YouTube. Come on, let these fools watch whatever they want. Look, there are 3 state channels. If you think about it this way, I just studied this topic in great detail, and I'm very firm in these beliefs. It's not ready for liberal taxation, but it's ready for war. Living without electricity, gas, heat, or elections is the only thing a post-Soviet person is prepared for. We weren't asked about this, so of course it's a debatable issue. I don't want to say anything. A lot of people, with your point of view, always give me these kinds of arguments. But then these people are underestimating themselves. Then they don't respect themselves. I believe that an adult, mentally healthy person has the right to defend themselves and their rights, their freedom with a weapon.
Tell me, please, you were just talking with Dennis that society is not ready, Ukrainian society. So let me ask you this question. On the one hand, this society wasn't ready for the internet or for something else or for carrying weapons. If that's the case, but still, I want to say something else. When Kyiv wasn't taken in 3 days, I mean, what kind of society is this Ukrainian society? Dennis?
It's unique. It's truly unique. It was only thanks to the people that Putin couldn't occupy Ukraine, not because of Zelensky, but thanks to the people, only because of the people. At the same time, these people endure, they tolerate scoundrels in power, they tolerate corruption, and for the most part, these people give up their freedom. You offer him freedom, but he refuses and insists on staying in handcuffs with a slave owner for life. Many people in Russia are like that. Here it's fewer, but I think around 60% still are. This is a unique case. We have a very complicated region.
Do you mean specifically the post-Soviet generation or everyone?
All 20-year-olds who were born in 2006 and 2005, most of them also have exactly the same mindset. I'm just telling you, propaganda has affected them. They would now say no to free gun ownership. Why do we need elections? We have Zelensky. Who else if not him? We have to fight to the end and so on. They have been completely brainwashed. I don't rely on age at all, really. You have to rely on people with common sense, or without it. You can have common sense at 80 and you can be a complete idiot at 20.
Does this mean, Dennis, that this propaganda, which exists both in Ukraine and in Russia, which brainwashes people, is in its essence unique, genius, if they manage to do it so well?
Of course, they've outdone Goebbels. I'm telling you this for sure. I've always admitted that these Solovyovs have outdone Goebbels because Goebbels operated without technology. And with leaflets, pamphlets, little books, at most radio. Here, all information sources are available, offering true informational freedom. Overall, they're succeeding. Today, they've succeeded in Ukraine. Well, school is like a foundation.
Well, yes, I just read you one comment. I'm interested in your opinion. I rarely leave comments, but thank you, Radio Vera, for the variety, for this buffet. Yes, well, a buffet is when different people come. Yes, it's a pity you stopped inviting Stefanov, another balanced and thoughtful speaker, just like Denis Elisevich. Are you familiar with Sasha Stefanov, who is a young man, now already a foreign agent, but he used to live in Russia. He's a historian. And he made a film about Donbass. He was there, he went there and shot a movie. And I was just remembering him yesterday, Dennis. He stopped an old lady on the street there and asked her, "So how is life for you?" And they started talking, and this old lady said, "I don't care what flag will be flying over the village council, I just don't want war." That's also a post-Soviet person, that old lady.
That's a post-Soviet person, definitely. But to judge her for something, well, from a practical point of view, at her age, in her situation in the village, she's actually right. She doesn't need much from life. Honestly, it doesn't matter what flag is there. Can I think like that in those terms? Definitely not. We shouldn't, but we also shouldn't judge her.
Then again, Dennis, someone might say to you, well, but wait, you're saying we should sacrifice territories. And these people who actually lived in Ukraine under the Ukrainian flag will now live under the flag flying above them, the Russian tricolor. The question is whether these people agree to live under this flag or not. After all, no one will ask them, they'll just hang the flag there, and that's it. That's how it was, for example, in Kherson. Yes, until it was taken back. They even opened pharmacies there, I think, and the ruble zone had already been introduced, as far as I remember, something like that. So what should be done about this?
There's a big difference. I never said to give up territories. I always said territorial compromise. Thank you. If I call for giving up territory or making sacrifices, I should be responsible and have influence. Zelensky is responsible, not me. I didn't cause this and won't take the blame for his decisions. The example with Kherson is incorrect. Kherson was occupied. Well, it was surrendered, but essentially it was occupied. Negotiations are underway in Geneva to prevent what you mentioned. Humanitarian corridors to Russia and Ukraine will be established with certain conditions for those who remain. You want to live under the Ukrainian flag? Here's a corridor, some help, go. If you want to go to Russia, use this corridor. If you stay here, these are the conditions. What do you mean? This is what the negotiations are about.
We're not talking right now.
Just for Russia to leave, that's it.
See, for example, I don't hear that at all. Russia categorically rejects any options for finding some kind of compromise. The issue is being raised very firmly that Donbass must be completely liberated from the Ukrainian armed forces and handed over to Russia. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing about some kind of shadowy agreements, yes, that supposedly have been reached. Putin and Trump supposedly reached an agreement that, yes, they would have to give up the Donetsk region, and Trump agreed to it, but then apparently changed his mind. I don't really know what happened there. For example, I haven't heard of it myself. About what you're talking about some kind of compromises being made, in my opinion, I personally haven't heard of any compromises at all. It's very strict, just no, and that's it. Moreover, even that reasonable thing you mentioned, and we discussed it, I mean this duty-free zone, duty-free. I'm saying, well, yes, basically like the one that should be the zone in Donbass, yes, let's say the border area, this one, yes, the demarcation zone. Well, Russia doesn't even agree to that, no, and that's it.
Why not mention that Zelensky says daily he won't withdraw troops from Donbass?
Well, Zelensky talks about that too. Yes, yes.
But that's important, since you talk as if Zelensky agrees.
No, I also think he doesn't. Of course, it's important, but again, for example, it would sound something like this. Russia is suggesting, guys, let's find a compromise. Let's really do it. What exactly? Tell me.
Please, Dennis, why would she offer that, guys? Let's find a compromise. She's advancing. She's taking our territory.
That's absolutely right. They shouldn't offer any compromise at all.
She can't handle this. It's ridiculous and not even serious.
She won't.
Do this.
As of today. Yes, but then what kind of compromise can Zelensky propose? Zelensky, except for saying, guys, I can't give up these lands, can't say anything else either. Tell me.
What do you think the peace talks are about right now?
Then I can't understand. Honestly, call me stupid if you want, but I just can't understand.
What I'm telling you about right now, what happened at the end of December. Oh, at the end of last year, a decision was made not to make the details of the negotiations public. Africans were upset with Yermak for leaking inside info to journalists. That's no longer happening. Now only general info is shared, which is what they're discussing. Also, you forget one more thing.
It's believed that
Russian troops will also withdraw from these 20% of the territories and will not re-enter them.
That would be wonderful. I really want to hope for that. That's what I can say. I just don't know that. That's why I'm saying I don't know. I can't understand what they're always negotiating about there. That's what I'm talking about. If that's really the case, well, let's put it this way. If you know a little more, well, that's wonderful. It's great when there's really an opportunity for some kind of compromise. Because for me personally, I keep saying this all the time, I don't see it. For me, it's like déjà vu. We heard this a year ago. Look, Trump came to power. We already started hearing it. All of this, tomorrow we'll sign everything. Any moment now, that's it. It's literally just about to happen. By the end of last year, it didn't work out. It didn't work out at the beginning either. Today, Zelensky announced it. Yesterday, it was someone else. Yes, hoping to finish by the end, already this year by the end. You're right, the year has just started. The question is, what are they talking about then the whole time?
I want to ask you, Dennis, in the same stream that I watched, the one you recorded yesterday, there was a lot of conversation. You talked a bit about Ukrainian society. That's why I asked you what this society is like. You said it's contradictory, that these are not simple people at all who, on the one hand, can withstand this nightmare for 4 years. But on the other hand, what you're talking about is this post-Soviet mindset syndrome. Yes, so tell me, please, what is the attitude toward the United States? Some smart guy wrote here that you, well, haven't flip-flopped yet today. But maybe today you support the American President Donald Trump, and the person writing this won't surprise you if in a year you don't really support him anymore, because at one time you advocated for Ukraine to join NATO, and I never heard that. Dennis, I'm telling you this.
That today I'm advocating for this. I want Ukraine to be a member. They won't take us. And I just realized and said it earlier than others that they won't let us in. We need to think about neutrality. Where's the flip-flopping in that?
Regarding the attitude of Ukrainian society towards Americans, towards Trump, and towards American society in general, it's, to put it mildly, negative. Is this also propaganda, or do Ukrainians have some complaints about Americans and they just don't express them clearly? Because I understand there's negativity, but I don't understand the reasons.
Propaganda. It's all propaganda, and it's not just related to the war or to Zelensky, this whole organization. And the globalist media, 95% of the media in Ukraine is controlled by globalists. And there it's only anti-Trump, anti-Musk. The propaganda is very harsh and very crude, with incorrect translations and misleading headlines that deceive people. People don't read the articles, not even the translations, let alone the originals, and they think in headlines. And everything in this regard is very bad. They've been convinced that war is good and peace is bad, and now this bastard Trump wants to end the war. And do you know when? Trump would be great if he gave us some tomahawks, $1 billion or so, maybe $300. And if he hit Moscow with American weapons, with the American army itself, we would just adore him. But then you wonder, all this happens, but what about tomorrow? Will there be an answer, or will Putin just surrender and say, that's it? So right away they tell you that means you're a Kremlin agent, go away, goodbye. Why won't they join the discussion like you invited them? It's the same reason. The names you've studied will just come here and say, Trump is bad, he should have done this or that. I asked the question, guys, America should, Trump should. Why don't we want to live like America? Why?
That's an interesting question, Dennis.
Because you'll have to compete in a fair market. You won't be able to become a little deputy and have $50 million and a salary of $30,000 in an envelope. You'll have to earn money in the market, be better at something than others, work hard, have some knowledge and skills, but they don't want that. They want a privileged position to get into the government or close to it and rob it. I want to figure this out now. Some American website wrote an article saying that in Ukraine, a whole sector, an industry of these grant agencies and grant-funded media has been created. That's true. USAID was sending $10 billion a year, and they built a whole industry around that, tax-free, where all sorts of nobodies are stuffing their pockets with money, and with what narrative? So what's happening is good, mobilization is good, I'm in a great position, I'm protected, and I'm getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. What, Elisevich? He's a Kremlin agent. They don't care about Ukraine. Do you get it? That's the point. They don't care about Ukraine. They're doing well in this situation, they're making money, they're safe, so why would they need reforms? Ask yourselves, people, why would people like that need reforms if those reforms would leave them without a piece of bread, having to go work at a car wash? If they're lucky, that's where the real problem lies.
Well, when these people find some character, let's say it's you who left Ukraine, right, due to circumstances, or the late Balashov or someone else. And you mentioned an external enemy. They create the image of an enemy, a person who left. You're not in Ukraine, after all. If you were saying this while sitting there, you would probably be put in prison or sent to the front or something else. But here you have the opportunity to speak, yet you're considered an enemy because you left, not like the enemy who, let's say, is there and causing problems. How can this be explained to people?
There's only one explanation. The videos are all on the channel. I said the same things in Kiev, which is why I left. At first, I could say such things, but when I realized I soon couldn't, I left. It's all explained simply. Let them ask, you're addressing the question to me, right? Let them ask, Why is it that today, being in Ukraine, you can't say the things that I'm saying? Have I ever told you even once that Ukraine should basically surrender to Russia? That it should basically capitulate? That Putin is good, doing a great job? Never, honestly.
Never.
And other speakers, there are only a few of them. They don't say things like that either. We say we have an alternative view on development, on ending the war, on the future. That's it. That's the crime. Well, it turns out someone said that the truth is extremism in countries like these.
Tell me, please, I want to ask you a question. Why do they ask you that kind of question? Alexandra asked Dennis why the Russian economy hasn't collapsed in 4 years despite all the sanctions imposed on it. What does Dennis think about this?
Russia is a resource-based country that continues to sell raw materials and energy resources, and these sanctions aren't particularly dangerous for Russia. The main thing is that it keeps doing what it does, selling raw materials, including to the European Union. It's great, it's cheap, but Russia sells it to China on a massive scale, and to India. Well, it used to sell to India. That's why, I'll say it again, Putin earns €1 billion a day just from energy resources. €1 billion every single day.
By the way, Dennis, about Hungary and this whole story with the Druzhba oil pipeline and Orban's statements, if I'm not mistaken, Slovakia is involved too, led by Fico. How would you comment on this situation regarding Hungary and Slovakia, considering what you said at the very beginning of our broadcast about Hungary blocking those, $9 billion, I think?
€9 billion, yes?
Yes, right. And accordingly, Ukraine will eventually go bankrupt. Taking this into account, how would you comment on this situation?
A serious situation has emerged with Ukraine caught in politics. Hungary will hold elections soon, in April. They want to remove Orban. Zelensky doesn't like Orban and basically is helping them do it. If we ask the question from Ukraine's point of view, is what we're doing beneficial? No, it's not beneficial, but for some reason we're doing it. So it turns out that Europe can buy energy resources from Putin, but Ukraine can't use its own pipeline to transport this oil. And this so-called reverse gas that we're buying, it's actually Russian gas. It's just that, say, Slovakia bought it first, then resold it to Ukraine, but it's still Russian gas. It's like saying, I'll refuse to pay the conductor out of spite, or I'll cut off my nose to spite my face. It's the same idea.
Honestly, this whole oil story really amazed me because, well, for example, I only recently found out that Russia was actually selling a huge amount of oil and gas to the European Union, literally even in the midst of all the imposed sanctions and everything else. Yes, I mean, the numbers mentioned were just insane, and the question arose, how could this even be possible? So for me, this whole story is really so unclear, honestly, and I, for example, can't really explain it to myself either. And naturally, when they ask the question, how does Russia manage to hold on under so many sanctions? Well, there's your answer. And in some cases, it's the key.
In this situation, it's one of the key things. It seems like people don't talk about it much. Thank you, but you mentioned monstrous numbers. I'll give you the approximate numbers. €320 billion over 3.5 years of war. Yes, almost 4. So, let's look at Russia's military budget over these 4 years. Well, about $300 billion. That means the European Union has completely paid for the war. Thank you.
Yes, and that's exactly it. I remember we had some of our first, let's call them military broadcasts. Yes, we talked with an entrepreneur from Moscow, Dmitry Potapenko. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. Thank you. Yes, that's right. And he was saying that the European Union is a bunch of weaklings who can't do anything. That was right at the very beginning, and now so much time has passed. It's not like nobody understood him back then. Why are they weaklings? Look at how they stood up. Look at how they acted, right? But now it turns out, yes, they really are weaklings. It's honestly an amazing story.
They're not weaklings. They're not weaklings. I think they're not weaklings. I don't want to call them idiots. They're not idiots. Take Schroeder, the former chancellor of Germany, who's somewhere over there in Gazprom. They're corrupt. Well, not all of them. I don't want to accuse everyone. Well,
Schroeder for sure. You won't be wrong about that, most likely. Well, look.
Do you think they just sat there? Europe was dependent on Russian energy resources, let's say, and they didn't know it was dangerous. Well, of course they knew.
Well, that means
who benefited from this? They could have prepared for this since the 2000s and handled the situation earlier. You can buy gas in America. You can buy gas.
They say it's expensive. Yes, well, here, yes, that's right. Here they're just saying that, yes, after all. What does it mean to go beyond, to step outside your comfort zone? Well, everyone was comfortable. Yes, it was comfortable for Europe to buy inexpensive gas from Russia, and it was comfortable for Russia, of course, to sell it to Europe. And so they lived seemingly without any worries, and then suddenly, boom, war broke out, and that's when the withdrawal symptoms started. How, what, why? Well,
Yes. Well, I think that, as Denis Elisevich says, it wasn't just a sudden boom, Denis, but as I understand it, what is it?
Why wasn't it a boom?
Well, yes, there were reasons. No, Denis?
I didn't miss anything. What? For what? There were reasons?
When Denis Mazar, like BAM and the war.
Well, of course. No, of course, not BAM. I think...
Also not BAM. And speaking of which, have we ever talked about the reasons? No, Dennis, you mean the reasons for the war? No?
Well, it's a whole set of reasons. It's Ukraine's wrong policy. It's the corruption of the Europeans. It's what we just talked about. They raised Putin. After all, Trump said it. You can find this video. Stoltenberg was the NATO Secretary General then. I think it was in 2016 or 2017. He came to, well, this NATO summit. He seated them at the table and said during his first term, wait a minute. You want us to protect you from Russia, but you also buy their gas for huge sums. How does that make sense? Let's end this and set NATO contributions at 5% of GDP. Even then, he pushed them while they acted confused. We need to consider why this happened, though it's hard to be certain. Is it just one reason, like something happened there and Putin snapped, he went in, or is Zelensky bad? It's a huge set of reasons, but the main reason is that Ukraine is a poor, weak, and dependent country. We should have followed the path of Poland, which became wealthy, now has a strong army, and is buying crazy amounts of weapons. But here people think that you can just do something like that and then get rich later. Although, in fact, no one even sets that goal. Everyone is fine with begging because they make money off these handouts. As I already said, thank you, but we need to set the goal differently.
Yes, well, you just mentioned Poland as a good example, but here's the question. Poland also got rich, and not just by chance, but thanks to close and strong cooperation with Europe.
We also have close cooperation with Europe now, but we haven't gotten rich. They say the same thing about Israel, that Israel wouldn't even exist if America didn't help. No, Israel is simply a proper country, a democracy with an economy, a country that is being built for its own people. Poland, besides what you mentioned, of course, received tens of billions of euros from the European Union. I agree with you, but it's not just that I agree, it's a fact. But Balcerovich's reforms and other reforms were there. Small businesses with low taxes, loans, an honest court system. There were open markets. That was there too. The level of corruption and everything else, all of that was there. It wasn't just that they gave money and we got rich. We're also given 80 billion a year. But where is that money? Nowhere.
But here I agree with you. With such a level of corruption, which existed in Ukraine, by the way, and I can mention Russia too, and I wouldn't be wrong. Of course, it's impossible to build an economically developed society.
No, well, actually about Poland, what Denis Elisevich just said, and by the way, about Israel too. But this rhetoric that if it weren't for the Americans, Israel would have collapsed long ago, that's just nonsense. And Denis said very correctly that Israel chose a completely different, so to speak, policy of state development, of building the state, and achieved a completely different result. This, as Denis calls it, what's that funny word you use? Well, when everyone is asking, like, give us this, give us that.
Beggar?
Beggar?
Beggar.
Well, something like that, you know. That's probably not quite right either. I'm by no means trying to discredit Ukrainians, but this is the rhetoric of Volodymyr Zelensky. I remember how it was with Israel when he came and said, you must, and that's not up for discussion. And that didn't get the most positive reaction from the Israelis at the time. By the way, about Israel, Denis, the vote, Ukraine has now voted in support of Israel. I think Scheitelman talked about this yesterday. What was this vote and where did it take place?
I missed it. I know that Israel voted in support of Ukraine.
Yes, sorry, I misspoke.
Yes, there was a resolution, I think, about ending the war in Ukraine, something like that. And it turns out America abstained, and there was a lot of noise about it here. And Israel surprisingly voted in favor, surprisingly because we usually don't vote for Israel at all on these other resolutions, but Israel voted in favor.
Well, that's exactly what they just wrote to us now, that Ukraine voted against Israel twice, supporting the Palestinian state, and Israel suddenly, so to speak, didn't say, well, we'll do the same to you, but instead voted in support of Ukraine. This also speaks sort of, well, to the attitude of Israeli society towards Ukraine. I would like, so to speak, for Ukrainian society to somehow, well, appreciate this too, or at least acknowledge it. I don't know.
Alexandra, it's not society that votes in the UN, but the state leaders who decide how to vote. The same is true for Ukraine. It's the government, not the people. Maybe everything is fine regarding Israel and Ukraine, but those in power are doing different things and making different decisions.
Which also surprises me. Dennis, well,
Yes, but we definitely already discussed this with you. We definitely discussed it. But going back to our topic, here's why that country is successful. No, Ukraine. I'm not saying I'll be president tomorrow and that we won't need anyone or can do it all alone. No, for example, look at Javier Milei. He made a so-called currency swap in the US for $40 billion. They bought pesos. It was necessary to get through the stabilization period like that, to curb inflation, to deal with loans, and all without any questions. But we are asking you because we want to live like you do, in democracy, with freedom of speech, with economic freedom, to trade, to become a part of Western civilization, completely. That's one kind of conversation. Give me, but I'll do things my own way here. That's a completely different conversation. Give me because I want to stay in power and wage war. Give me because I want to steal. That's just, well,
this really reminds me of a similar situation to what you're describing. Saying, give me, I want to live like you, is different from saying, give me, I'll do whatever I want. So when refugees come here, well, to Canada or to the United States, I'll talk about Canada. And if these are the refugees or immigrants who come here and try to assimilate without forgetting their own culture, no, of course not. But at the same time, they enrich Canadian society, Canadian life. But there are others who come, let's say, and say, for example, I'm not talking about all Muslims, but still, I'll do whatever I want. This is my world and my country. All of you get out of here. This reminds me exactly of what you just said, and this issue exists in both Canada and the US. Thank you.
I know. Let me just share with you a litmus test. I'll tell you what became the litmus test that confirms my point. So at the beginning of the war, there was a conflict regarding Starlink's Elon Musk. In fact, Elon Musk sided with Ukraine. People don't want to talk about it, but he turned on the Starlinks, and that helped us hold the front. Back then, if there hadn't been Starlinks, Putin would have occupied the entire left bank of Ukraine. So we have this figure, Prytula. You probably know him. He's a volunteer. He has a big volunteer fund. He's Soros's man. So he has an employee, and her pseudonym is Milania Podolyak. Maybe that's her real name, but it doesn't matter. And she has an account on the former Twitter, now X. And at the moment of this conflict, imagine the whole world is watching under a microscope what's happening in Ukraine, paying attention to every statement. And she writes a post like this: Elon Musk, shut your F face and give us Starlinks. You see, that's the whole policy of Zelensky. Shut your mouth, well, to put it mildly, and give us money.
I want to read it to you. Please send Dennis greetings from Andrei Lugansky and other fans of Dennis's work. We appreciate him and constantly quote him. But here's a question for me, and I'll connect it to you, Dennis. Alexander, at the beginning of the broadcast, you mentioned that we should learn from Denis Elisevich how to respect guests. Yes, I did say that, I confirm it. There are a lot of insults toward your guest in the comments. No one is reacting in any way, but here's a question for me. How do you want us to respond? This is half the chat, then we should just throw it all out. Excuse my language. How do they even get here? You might ask me. I don't even know that.
What you read like, we love you, Dennis, that was a troll. That's trolling.
Really? Thanks. How do you know?
Well, I know by the last name of the person they were talking about.
Well, listen, it's a whole science, dear Denis Elisevich, figuring out who's a troll, who's not, what's true, what's not. You could just go crazy. Back then, I was foolish because I took what that person wrote literally and didn't understand. Thank you. Look, when people talk about a situation like this, Those who come, those who write, yes, for example, look, now there are almost 2,000 people. They're writing something, Dennis, they're saying something. So probably the best way is not to look at this chat at all, not to read it. That's it. I'm telling you, it's a whole science. You need to graduate from university to understand who's joking around and who's telling the truth.
Is that it? I've always been interested in something else. It's the same nicknames. They watch every stream we do, every stream I do, every video. I can see that they're watching. Spend this time instead of trolling on something useful for yourself. You just don't need it. Learn something, artificial intelligence, for example, go and study it. Well, people waste their lives on this kind of crap, just on some hate. I'm standing up for his rights, even fighting for them, but he still needs to find something negative in it just because he personally doesn't like me.
Well, yeah, but when, for example, if they're normal people, they write to you, I don't like you, Denis Elisevich. Because of this, because if I ask you, what's the main point? Your opponent, the one who tells you, well, Dennis, you're wrong. Let me prove to you that it's not like that. There are people like that.
No, there are similar things from no names who then say, I'll prove it to you now. Come debate with me so your audience of 300,000 viewers, well, subscribers can see me. Something like that. So they just want to use it.
I see.
Of course, someone who is sincere acts completely differently, and I know how it works.
Exactly. Listen, well, that's interesting. Come debate me. You already have more than 300,000. So that audience will recognize me and come to me. Is that correct?
They think so, but don't realize it won't work that way.
Well, yes, these people will come once, watch your conversation with this person, and won't come back again because that's your, so to speak, subscriber. Am I understanding this correctly, Dennis? Well,
of course. I mean, it doesn't work like one person has a lot and another has a little. Here I am underestimated. I'll take him down in the debates and get plenty. No, you're already visible. It means they're not interested. The way I understand it, they don't have 3 million, but someone does have 3 million.
Tell me, well, why your attitude towards Israel? Why do you go on Jewish radio? This proves that, well, like you, well, we already know tainted Jews and so on. This topic could be...
Well, here it's the passport. Mainly the passport that's of interest.
Well, those are trolls.
Well, I'm sure there are 20 comments from the same username. Those are all trolls.
Tell me, please, today, going back to Trump's speech, from your point of view, how strong was this address to the nation? Because today it's already being evaluated as one of the best. This kind of address is held every year, but the point is that there hasn't been such a strong, remarkable address before. Do you think so too?
No, well, of course, Trump knows how to do this. It was the longest one. It set a record, but I was focused on what's ahead. The year 2026 is very important for Trump, and there will be a lot of events related to other countries with dictatorial regimes and so on. I watched it, liked it, then forgot about it.
Well, they wrote to us that 90% of your audience are your supporters. And tell Dennis that I would like to have such a person in Russia. Seriously, respect, but now I don't even know if this is sarcasm, Dennis, or not.
They really wrote that.
You've already changed your mind countless times. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Listen to the context.
Well, of course, I see the context. Naturally,
that's what a law degree does, both for you and for Denis Manzar. But I have an economics degree, and that's probably why I'm so naive. And of course, that's sad. Denis Manzar?
Dennis, yes. Well, I still wanted to... Again, I understand that history doesn't deal in hypotheticals, let's say, expressions and so on and so on. But still, if, for example, let's say Zelensky wasn't exactly convinced. Yes, but what they've been talking about lately, for some reason, well, maybe for a month now, is his disbelief at the start of the war. And as a result, what happened is what happened. But again, the question is how much, well, really, this information, I mean, confirmed information about the start of this full-scale invasion operation was, first of all, actually confirmed literally on the eve of it. Relatively speaking, how much would this time, a week, maybe two, have saved, so to speak, part of Ukraine? Maybe how much Ukraine could have strengthened itself during that time, considering that apparently Russia had been preparing for this for a very long time. They say almost, I think, the first, or rather already in, I think, 2018, not 18, but yes, I think, yes, already in 2018, preparations were in full swing.
Well, look, Zelensky found out about this not a week in advance. The CIA reported this to Zelensky in the fall of 2021. He had nearly 6 months to prepare and received recommendations, but ignored them all. He didn't find out a week in advance. By then, it was already 200% clear. I'm not even mentioning the day before. He was clearly told there will be a war, get ready. He said, I won't evacuate the population because there will be panic. I'll tell you, you can't imagine what happened on the 24th in Ukraine and Kyiv. I've never seen anything like it, and I hope I never do again. It wasn't just panic. Panic isn't the right word. It was something unbelievable. So what's the difference?
Ask Denise why Europe turns a blind eye to the draft offices. Thank you.
Something is happening on their territory, L1. Second, they can't fund the war and encourage it while also opposing the TCC. It suits them, it helps them, that's their task, their goal. As long as Ukraine, not Europe, is fighting Putin, they need the TCC. Tomorrow they may need something else. Zelensky, please, we'll give you money, just hang in there.
One more question, Dennis. When can we expect new content from you?
I've also heard about that, by the way, about the spread of information regarding nuclear weapons and their maintenance. These conversations started about Ukraine being, let's say, the only country in the world. Well, that's probably true. The only country that voluntarily gave up nuclear weapons in the early 90s. As a result, the much discussed Budapest Memorandum, which everyone is still talking about. But I have a slightly different question, probably. What should the security guarantees be, in your opinion, Dennis? Let's say, hypothetically, you are considering this issue as president. In your view, what would be the most optimal security guarantees for Ukraine today? Because for some reason, many people thought that the Budapest Memorandum was an ironclad guarantee. The Americans guaranteed it, Russia guaranteed it, but in the end, these guarantees didn't really lead to anything. What should they be like, and why is there so much discussion about them?
Well, people need something to talk about, so they talk. They need to sell something to the public, so that's what they do. I answer this question every time I'm on your show, and my answer is always the same. Here is what Trump proposes. We have to sign no matter what's written there, and he proposes, well, financial and military aid. If Russia attacks, no one is going to fight for Ukraine. It's exactly the same as it is now. Let's put it that way, or like it was at the beginning of the war. To be precise, it's been like this for about all these 4 years. They offer it, we sign, but it won't save us. And nothing will save us.
And how much do you actually believe that, for example, hypothetically, if peace agreements had been signed, if they had been signed, that Putin would settle for this, and after, well, let's say some kind of pause, yes, he wouldn't resume this so-called special military operation again. Well, wouldn't he continue the war?
Thank you.
I believe that Putin's goal is all of Ukraine, the entire territory.
Well, look, how can you govern such a huge country? How is Putin going to govern in Lviv, tell me, or in Ternopil?
And how did the Soviet Union govern?
No, you need to appoint a goal-lighter. The people must.
That's the way it's done?
It will become a partisan war which would only hurt him, and he knows that well.
I was thinking about that too. That's exactly how it is. Well, how come he can't handle it?
Well,
No, that won't happen.
Here's the example of the Soviet Union, which also says a lot. It would seem so, yes. How can you imagine now, for example, that Tajikistan and Turkmenistan were a single country and were governed by the USSR? Of course, they had their own administration and their own land, that's all clear. But still, it was one country and it was all under control. Well,
Only through the Gauleiters, only through the Gauleiters. And by the way, The Guardian wrote, did you quote that about Zaluzhny to me today? It was written there that Putin planned to appoint Murayev as a Gauleiter in Ukraine. Did you know about that?
well, I haven't heard that, but I do know about Murayev.
Well, yes.
It's written in this article.
The most desirable president for Putin right now would probably be, yes, Ukraine.
One of them. That's right, but I want to tell you, you asked earlier, will Putin advance? Will he advance? Of course, if things stay the same as today and yesterday, then of course he will go. If things stay the same as today and yesterday, then no guarantees, not even from Trump or ratified by Congress, will protect Ukraine. Only a strong economy will protect Ukraine. That's what will protect Ukraine. A globally integrated, powerful, free economy and freedom for the people.
Well, a strong free economy and an economy for the people. Dennis, that's the same thing.
I'm saying a strong economy, a free economy, and freedom for the people.
Well, yes. So if this is the only way for Ukraine to survive as a state, what do you think is the main message, the main thing that needs to be done today for this to happen, if it's possible?
I've already told you the main point. There are also several reforms that need further exploration. In general terms, we need to live by American rules. I suggest taking the American Constitution as a basis and adapting it for Ukraine. I'm not joking right now, and believe me, I'm not saying this just for effect or to put on a show. I really mean it. If Ukraine doesn't live the way Western civilization used to, based on these values, we don't stand a chance. And if the main priority isn't the economy, a real market economy, real capitalism,
Well, someone already wrote to you here. So what are you suggesting? To bend over for the Americans or something like that?
I don't know what that means. Honestly,
Well, you said,
I'm saying I haven't heard anything about Murayev being a Russian agent.
no, well, they're telling you now, Dennis, that if Dennis said we should follow the American path, he means developing the economy, developing society, and that we need to enter into some negotiations with the Americans. Or I don't know. Well, that's what they wrote. So does that mean we have to lose our independence, lose everything, and bow down to the Americans? I don't know how to answer that question.
I didn't say that. We can't discuss the fantasies of some person. I didn't say that to you. Let's give away America's territory. We don't need that territory at all.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. But why does America need Ukraine's territory? Did I want to say that now? That was a good question. I found it, but while you were talking in Ukrainian as well, if it's in Ukrainian, I skip it because I don't want to sound silly, so to speak, speaking in Ukrainian.
What? Are you good at it?
Do you think you're teasing me right now?
No, you've read it several times. If something was wrong,
I would have told you. Listen, please ask. I found this with Dennis. Why do people in Europe come out in support of Ukraine but don't want to protest against the war, the military enlistment officers, and for freedom of speech in Ukraine? Why don't people abroad want to help their own people?
this is an important and interesting topic. It's a shame we're discussing it only at the end. There was just a wave of these rallies marking the anniversary of the war in different parts of the world. They were held in America, in Canada probably, and in Europe as well.
I saw one in Tel Aviv yesterday.
Yeah, by the way, Reznikov spoke there. Why the hell he said something about how to defeat Russia in Tel Aviv? Reznikov,
And those are battles.
they should have thrown tomatoes at him. I saw that video there. It's terrible, but that's not the point. Although, in this case too, people come out with Ukrainian flags acting aggressively. I think most of these rallies are paid for. And as for what they're standing there for, no one can answer the question. For Ukraine? What does it mean for Ukraine? You're standing there for Zelensky. If it were for Ukraine, then please stand against the war, for freedom, for elections. That's for Ukraine. But they're standing there for Zelensky. And I don't see it any other way. People come to me, write nasty things. I go to their account. In his bio, it says half Ukrainian, half American. He's already half American. He attends rallies, oddly wearing a mask, and messages me, "You were bought for rubles." No arguments or proof. Just, "You were bought for rubles." That's all. I keep looking at his page, and there he has a powerful video of Zelensky's speech. Zelensky, that's a good question. If you're such a cool guy and Zelensky is doing everything right, why aren't you at the front? Well, who would I be if I were on your show right now talking about going all the way to victory, driving them back to Moscow while I'm sitting in Miami? Well, you would say you're an immoral guy, and all these people are immoral too when you approach them and ask them some questions. At these rallies, it's my opponents who do this. It's Sherry's wife. I'm in conflict with her, and I absolutely despise him. She came up to me to ask questions. They sent me these videos.
What is this Arya? I don't know.
Sherry?
Sherry.
Sherry,
Yes, his wife, and they're being aggressive there. They sent me other videos. Others approached them. I asked them questions in the comments myself, but there's no answer. These are completely immoral people. I just don't understand how someone can be like that.
Thank you, Dennis. I suggest we take a short break. We have a phone call coming in if Dennis can stay.
We won't be able to take it.
I'm always in favor.
Good morning. We're live. What's your name?
Good morning. My name is Mikhail.
Go ahead, Mikhail.
I have this question, or maybe I don't even know if it can be called a question, but still, I don't really believe, honestly, as a person. I don't believe that Zelensky didn't know that the war would start. I'm sure he knew. He was just playing into the hands of all the forces, let's say, that basically wanted this war and provoked it. Yes, because even if you take into account the statements made by Western leaders, let's say Angela Merkel and others, they said that we needed the Minsk agreements in order to give Ukraine the opportunity to prepare for war. And the preparations were underway. This was written about by Telegram channels and other media. Well, sort of. There was information in the media that construction was underway. And we can now see that all kinds of structures were built, fortified ones, in order to, as they say, receive troops. But Putin, he wasn't prepared for this war. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entered the territory of Ukraine, such a huge territory. In total, I think at the beginning of the war, he had
780,000 people. According to all theories, that's a very small number to occupy such a territory.
Thank you.
Well, Mikhail probably missed the beginning, as I understand it. He's a regular listener. He missed the start of the broadcast. I already gave the argument why. Really, it's not much. Why he managed to do it. Because he knew these territories would be handed over, and he just needed to physically control them, not actually capture them. That's the first thing. Second, Ukraine was preparing fortification. Mikhail, honestly, no offense, you really don't understand what you're talking about. Zaluzhny spoke and said, I wasn't allowed to prepare Ukraine for war. What fortifications are you talking about? There aren't any. And there were no fortifications. Something was built there during the war. Putin wasn't preparing, but that's a truly unique statement. Putin was supposed to start this war. Not supposed to, but he was planning to in 2020, in the summer of 2020.
Yes, I heard that too. Yes, very much.
I know this for sure. So, you know, the Telegram channels published it, but sorry, that's not an argument. You can make 20 of them with money from any intelligence agency or sponsor, boost their subscribers, and publish whatever you want there. That's exactly what's happening today in Ukraine and Russia. None of that is an argument.
I have two, kind of painful questions, I would say. One of them you've already been asked, and it's being repeated in a certain sense. So please ask, why did you say that people in Europe come out in support of Ukraine, but they don't want to protest against the war, against the military enlistment offices, or for freedom of speech in Ukraine? You didn't really answer everything. Why don't people abroad want to help their own people?
These are immoral people who put on Ukrainian flags, the Ukrainian coat of arms, and say they're for Ukraine, but in reality, they're not for Ukraine. They're actually comfortable in Europe and America. And some are there for money. Some just want to show themselves like, I'm not such a bad person. See how much I support Ukraine. It's complete immorality. They're there for Zelensky, I emphasize, not for Ukraine.
I want to ask you a question that comes up very often. I think it's eternal, just like the Jewish question is eternal. So is this one. I'm not stating this as my opinion. I have nothing to do with this issue. Dennis, I want to emphasize that. Judging by the statements about the Ukrainian reality today and in the past, Ukraine provoked the war with Russia and is entirely to blame for it. You must have heard something like this too, but we've never asked you about it.
Well, 1,000 times no. Ukraine did not provoke it. How could Ukraine provoke the war? Ukraine acted incorrectly. Yes, by the way, what Mikhail, who called, said that Angela Merkel admitted we were preparing Ukraine, Poroshenko said the same thing. Why? Because they didn't want to lose face. Like, look, we really wanted to make a deal with Putin. When Putin attacked, they came out and said, yes, actually, we were preparing. It's such a disgrace, that's all. Well, you see, if I say this now, does that mean Putin did the right thing? Attacking was unacceptable, in any case. Did all of Ukraine conduct its policy correctly? Well, of course not. If they had done it right, this wouldn't have happened today.
To be continued. I think
Actually, Dennis, the problem is also largely that people only hear what you say about Zelensky. You talk very little about Putin. Yes, and I think it's still necessary to emphasize it more. After all, who made this decision about the full-scale invasion? But with you, it somehow turns out like, yes, Putin, that's clear, but we won't discuss that. And instead, let's talk about Zelensky. And that's why I think people get this impression. It creates the impression that for the most part, well, no.
Let Kurbanova, Tymbalyuk, and those people do that.
Who? But why don't you want to, Dennis?
I'm not a propagandist. I'm interested in Ukraine's success, not in criticizing Putin. And just because I criticized Putin, I stated my position on the first day of the war, which is why I went on air.
Yes. People tune in like in batches. Yes, for example, someone today, roughly speaking, someone today could have found out about you. And so he's listening to our broadcast and he'll get the impression that you are mostly on the side, actually, even somewhere on Putin's side. Well, yes, Putin is to blame, but somehow I
Would never
say that. Zelensky is the main enemy. Zelensky is the only one who doesn't want the war to end.
I've never heard that from Dennis, or no.
I'm not saying that Dennis said that. Of course, I'm saying that people might get that impression.
Some personal problems that Dennis might give them that impression. Interesting. Well, now I want to draw a parallel again, well, an indirect one, of course, between Denis Elisevich and Hennady Balashov. I have never heard from Hennady, and we did a huge number of broadcasts together. He criticized the Ukrainian government. But I have never heard either Dennis or Hennady say a single kind word about the Russian president. And maybe I missed something. Well, then you were doing something else.
I can hang a sign on my forehead saying I'm against Putin. You see, I'm not playing this game. I don't have to justify myself to anyone. I'm a citizen of Ukraine. I influence my own country. I'm not going to focus on Putin in the fifth year because Zelensky doesn't want to end the war. When Zelensky wants to end the war, then we'll talk only about Putin if Putin doesn't want it. Today, Zelensky is the main obstacle to peace. Today, Ukraine is losing. That's definitely a reliable fact, unfortunately, for many people, including myself. So you say...
It's a definite, reliable fact that Zelensky doesn't want the war to end. But what exactly is this reliable fact?
That he doesn't want the war to end? What is this based on? Both on public statements and on non-public information, but the public information here is enough. The public information is enough.
Thank you.
Well, again, if you argue, say that this is based on the fact that Zelensky doesn't want to give up the Donetsk region without a fight. Thank you.
So does that mean it's better to give it up with a fight?
Well, no. What I mean is that no one is offering an alternative. They're telling him, pull out the troops and that's it. What happens next? We'll see.
No, it's not we'll see. Trump proposes a clear plan of action.
I'll say it again, we don't see it. This clear plan of action, for example, we don't see it. Maybe it exists somewhere, maybe it's being discussed somewhere. We've already talked about this on this broadcast.
So what are you suggesting? Well,
let's criticize Putin.
Well, let's criticize Putin.
No, but why did the scoundrel invade Ukraine?
He's not a dictator.
What does criticizing Putin have to do with it? We're just saying that, well, blaming everything on Zelensky is also kind of strange.
I've never said that Zelensky is to blame for everything. I've never said that.
Zelensky is specifically to blame for everything right now. As for Putin ending the war, I mean, does Putin want to end the war? No, and Zelensky doesn't either.
No, Putin doesn't want to end the war.
So Putin doesn't want to end the war anymore either.
And Dennis talked about this, that neither Putin nor Zelensky wants it. We've talked about this 100 times on our show. And Dennis said that neither Zelensky nor Putin wants to end the war. Am I right, Dennis, or not?
Of course, if I have to make reservations and justify myself with every word, well, that's definitely not for me. My position is already declared. Putin and Zelensky don't want the war to end. But for Putin, the end of the war doesn't mean losing power. Well, for Zelensky, it does mean losing power. That's why Zelensky is holding out. That's it. Trump definitely wants the war to end. Definitely wants it. Definitely. You can draw a parallel, and I've always said that.
That's what I wanted to say.
How can we demand compromise from the side that's winning? Tell me, please, I put myself in Putin's place. I'm such a scoundrel. I have a giant like Russia in my hands. We're winning. Well, what? A good guy is supposed to come out and say, you know, I was wrong. Let's make a compromise. After all, I did all these things. I was wrong. Well, only naive fools can sit and think like that when they watch our broadcasts. I'm not speaking to them.
Well, yes, by the way, about Trump being the only one who wants to end the war, I think you've repeated that a million times. I don't know if this is interesting to you or not, but from your point of view, what's the difference between anti-Semitism and Russophobia?
That's kind of a strange question, but both are forms of discrimination.
Well, as far as I know, everyone knows what anti-Semitism is, but Russophobia can be interpreted in different ways. It can be seen differently. Yes, what exactly do you mean?
Well, I'll put it this way. Anti-Semitism is simply based on nationality, while Russophobia is, but they did do something bad which caused that very Russophobia towards them, right?
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
If we're targeted for our passport, they're targeted for what they did.
Well, ask Denise. Well, they're asking to invite you and Panasenkov. Why did they start bombing Donetsk in January 2022?
Stop.
Nothing is written. Dennis, well,
I see.
understood. Thank you, Dennis. Well, they're asking.
No. Here they're clarifying why did they start bombing Donbass a week before the special military operation?
Well, it's clear, yes, Ukraine, the special military operation, Ukraine was bombing itself. Are we really still discussing Solovyov's talking points? That's outdated. I'm amazed. These people are either fools or bots.
Dennis, just a second. Why does Dennis say that Trump can't put maximum pressure on Zelensky, supposedly because that would mean Trump is taking Putin's side? That's the question. At the same time, Trump is publicly putting pressure on Zelensky and publicly imposing sanctions on Russia. Ask Dennis how he assesses this situation.
Where is Trump publicly pressuring Zelensky?
Well, I don't know.
Trump doesn't pressure Zelensky publicly, but he applies significant private pressure. I know that for a fact.
But what does it mean to put pressure behind the scenes and not put public pressure, Dennis? Well,
behind the scenes, he's pressured about the choice, about ending the war. He had a very unpleasant conversation with him at Mar-a-Lago during their last meeting. That's all. Signals are constantly being sent. It was the same with Yermak. The actions of Nabu are kind of behind the scenes. Publicly. Trump is probably putting more pressure on Putin than on Zelensky. Well, what bad things has he said about Zelensky in the last 3 months? Did he give him any ultimatum or conditions? No, he didn't.
by the way, Trump's manner of communicating with Zelensky today is much softer than it was not so long ago. Yes.
It's a deliberate tactic, yes.
But I wanted to ask you why.
I've already explained. The first reason is not to publicly take Putin's side. And the second reason is, honestly, weakening Russia is beneficial. Well, a nominal weakening. I'm not sure it actually weakens Russia that much. Well, let's put it differently. Let's say Russia is occupied with something. It's an unproductive use of resources. It's unproductive. Basically, everyone is fine with that. But Trump has these humanitarian considerations here to end the war, plus promises and so on and so forth.
Why do Russians love their president while Ukrainians hate theirs?
Subtitles by Dimitrorzok, they haven't been fully brainwashed yet. Probably, well, you know, many people love Zelensky. Well, how many? Maybe about 10% love him. And if they think that 90% love Putin, then they're mistaken. In dictatorships, everyone always loves the president. You see what the situation is. There on paper.
The war, Dennis, everyone is waiting for the war to end. Well, many are waiting, not everyone probably, but many. The war will end this year. There are no resources to continue it. But if Zelensky leaves before the end, there will be an intensification of the slaughter and Ukraine will lose more. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course, you understand. Look, yesterday there was a heavy shelling in Ukraine, in Kyiv in particular. I woke up, I saw it all at night, but I saw even more in the morning. Well, look at these attacks, residential buildings. People are losing their homes, their lives. How can this go on? How can this go on? And so going back to my namesake's point about Putin, well, What's the point of just criticizing Putin? You know, Putin will remain president for the next couple of years. Russia definitely isn't going anywhere. So do we need to negotiate with Russia or not? That's the simple question. If we don't need to, then we don't.
And I'll explain why. Because when all of this started back in 2022, yes, there was this thin thread. Who actually attacked whom, that immediately started to get blurred. Well, from the very first day, yes, for whom?
For whom?
For people.
But I don't know anyone who...
I believe that Ukraine attacked Russia. No, you just said it right. Does anyone really think that Ukrainians were shelling themselves? A huge number of people in Russia still believe that. They still believe that the shells are hitting only military targets and not, under any circumstances, civilian infrastructure. And as for what's happening there today, let's just say people are freezing from the cold. Well, what did you expect? They say, shrugging. People, what did you expect? Well, of course, they have to put some pressure, they have to win, and it's all about victory and defeat. And in Russia, this is very popular today, and a huge number of people believe that, in fact, it wasn't Putin who started the war. And you, Dennis, you know this very well. They are 100% sure that Ukraine started the war. Well, thanks to NATO, it's NATO that's fighting in Russia today, and a huge number of people are convinced of this. I believe we need to say every broadcast who did what and why. So you say, well, what should I stick a piece of paper on myself? Well, maybe that's exactly what I should do, even stick a piece of paper.
If you want to convince Russians, the kind who write things like that, then all I can do is wish you luck. I'm definitely not going to take part in that. There are people who do this for money professionally. I'm absolutely sure you won't convince a single person, and spending time on it is completely pointless. That's not my goal.
So you think this is propaganda, that this is propaganda?
Pure propaganda, brainwashing bots, and I won't do it.
Putin didn't start this war. Putin didn't start this war.
Well, you're telling us what they're saying now, and I don't understand. Dennis, not quite.
I'm just asking Dennis now. So you think that it wasn't Putin who started the war?
Dennis has never said that. I want to ask you, Dennis, ask Dennis why. Why didn't Ukraine develop autonomously and neutrally, but instead move towards Europe, thereby, so to speak, provoking Russia? If I may ask you such a question.
I'm not sure what questions are allowed now. When people say Putin didn't start the war, I react like this.
No, you're saying that talking about Putin starting the war is propaganda?
No, Dennis, I get the impression that you don't hear what Denis Elisevich is saying. Well,
then let's do it better.
That's not what I said, but from what you're saying. On the contrary, it causes, I see, such excitement among the people. But I want to say something else. So, Dennis, what was just asked, why didn't Ukraine develop autonomously and neutrally, but instead move toward Europe? If that's a fair question, I'm asking you.
Ukraine never moved toward Europe. It didn't move. It was only on paper. They only declared that we were moving toward NATO, toward Europe. When you're moving toward Europe, you can't suppress freedom of speech. When you're moving toward Europe, you can't put obstacles in the way of business. When you're moving toward Europe, you can't have corruption on such a scale. When the top officials of the state are openly stealing, you see, you can't control the courts. Make them your puppets. You can't have that. In a country of 35 million, the largest in Europe, we don't have a stock market. This can't be. Just what kind of path is this? They just turned Europe into a mess of corruption, a corrupt territory, a corrupt country, that's all, where only officials profited.
I have time to ask you one more question. You recently had a stream that you left. It was very short. I'll just ask you, not everyone knows, but many do, that you left. Can I ask why you left?
No, it started with shut your mouth, you know, you're a traitor. So what's the point of going on?
Yeah, just like that. It's like on Solovyov's show, Dennis, they also say shut up there.
It's the same thing. We have plenty of those in Ukraine. He went there with a clear assignment. There's that kind of character he's not even worth paying attention to, not worth paying attention to.
I just don't know. When I saw him, how he looks, I have no idea who he is.
He was the former Minister of Social Policy in Ukraine in Groysman's government under Poroshenko.
Someone said Dennis and I are like good cop and bad cop, but that's not true. If Dennis Mansa asks questions to Denis Elisevich or others, it's not like that. I mean, I don't think anyone is acting as the bad one.
Not a bad cop. It's just that if I supported Putin, I would come out and openly tell you I'm for Putin. Then I wouldn't have moved to America, but to Russia. I wouldn't be helping the Ukrainian army. I wouldn't be living in Ukraine. And right now, I wouldn't be working on a reform program for Ukraine, but for Russia. For me, that's just insulting.
No, Dennis, please understand me. I'm not saying that you support Putin.
But people will hear it that way.
That's why I'm saying that people hear it that way. That's exactly what I'm talking about, that people hear it that way.
No one wrote that. Only you heard it that way. No one wrote that.
No, they do write it. I mean, those are comments. Don't you read them yourself? No, I can see who is a traitor and who isn't.
Someone said Elisevich supports Putin.
No, regarding betrayal, that's something people often write.
Well, you just started talking about it, and right away,
They wrote about it right away.
well, yes, Denis Elisevich, Denis. Well, first of all, thank you very much for today. I definitely don't want you to, how should I say, well, to be nervous or irritated. Because my goal, for example, ours, is for as many people as possible to hear you. And when you come to Radio Vera here, like last time, I saw 30,000 views. Yes, I really did.
Let's put it this way. We are often criticized for saying the same thing every broadcast, and I agree with that. Every broadcast, we discuss pretty much the same topics, sometimes even asking the same questions that we ask every time. I just want things to be a bit more lively for us. That's why sometimes I take a certain position, not really taking someone's side, but just so things are a bit clearer, you know? Like who's for whom and what they're talking about, you know? And maybe so that it's a bit, not exactly more heated, but still a bit clearer. By no means, Dennis, don't think that I'm accusing you of anything, of being a supporter of Putin. Absolutely not. I've said this from the beginning and I'm saying it now. That's absolutely not the case. The only thing I could allow myself to say is that someone might have gotten that impression. Especially for those who, for example, have just recently joined us. Yes, maybe something was taken out of context and so on. That's all I meant. So by no means should you think...
If someone thinks that way, then he's an idiot and let him be. That's all I can say. If it seems that way, so be it. I'm not a boy. I'm not going to switch to new hosts or new channels every broadcast. Guys, let me say right away, I'm against Putin. Well, don't get the wrong idea.
No, of course not like that. Dennis, all right, Dennis, let's put it this way. Some Ukrainian guests, yes, let's call them experts in quotes. That's what they think. There's no getting away from it.
Thank you. They think that way because they work for Zelensky. That's their job to think that way. They think that way because they need to make an enemy out of me so people don't get distracted from their masters. They're just doing their job, but I want Ukraine to succeed, and for that we need constructive action, not criticism of Putin. During the war's 5th year, I criticized him too. In my channel's early months, I did as well. But since it's an existential war, I haven't criticized Zelensky in any channel videos. But today is already the 2nd day since the start of the 5th year of the war. What are we even talking about Putin for, when Zelensky's friends are being mentioned in reports to the US Congress? Have you seen this or not? So, Zelensky's business partner's friends stole $112 million, and we're supposed to be talking about Putin. Well, that's the job of the Kurbans, Symbalyuks, and all the others you mentioned. Those whom Alexander, the former minister, brought to my show. It's their job to talk this to death so that no one discusses it. It's probably Putin's fault, right?
Dennis, I want to ask you, please ask Dennis the last question. I've already asked you several times. Zelensky won't want to open the border before the elections to boost his ratings. No.
No, he will do it before the elections. We didn't discuss one topic there. Ursula told him directly in Kiev that they won't give them a date for joining the European Union. That really messed up all his plans, and I think it was a big blow in terms of continuing the war. I think it made him even more convinced that the war needs to go on. This takes away all his chances in the elections. He has only one loophole, to throw some handout like $10 for social benefits and to disband the territorial recruitment centers. To make an example, to publicly give everyone a public flogging. He was counting on joining the European Union in 2027, and he planned to maneuver with that during the elections, and he also said it wouldn't be public. That was the agreement. He said, I'm ready to withdraw troops from Donbass if you accept Ukraine into the European Union in 2027, so I can announce that date, that from January 1st we're in the European Union. He was publicly refused.
Yes, we really didn't touch on that. It's actually a very important point. Dennis, thank you so much. I want to say that it's one thing for us to be waiting for you, but it's another thing with this audience that comes. I'm curious, in your opinion, does the same audience come to Radio Vera as yours, or is it a little different?
No, it's a little different. It can't be the same. Your channel has been running for a long time. You have different guests, right? Thank you.
I think that a lot of your audience has come to us. I can judge this by the number of people who come, who are waiting for you, and who write comments. Thank you.
Dennis.
By the way, the day before yesterday, YouTube made a mistake. There was a glitch, and they wrote that you would be there, not the person who actually was. Maria Maksakova and Yuri Mamin. So you can't imagine. I thought they started breaking this chat apart because where is Elisevich? Where is Dennis? You promised idiots and so on. So a lot of your audience is here too. Thank you again so much and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.